Perspective is really difficult. So I kind of want to take some time to kind of go over my favorite perspective books and kind of explain what books are helpful and how you should go about it, because it's a very difficult topic to figure out, but it absolutely can be learned. And there's a lot of misconceptions about you needing to know math and all that stuff. You don't. So I'm going to start out with the first book that I recommend for anybody who wants to learn perspective. Now, my deal with perspective is I think that if you want to learn to draw, there's two things that you should start out with. Simple shape, so simple 2D shapes, circles, squares, rectangles, and then just obviously, if you can go from there, kind of do more organic stuff, play with lines, kind of make some funky, different shapes. Then you go into perspective. And I cannot think of a better book to learn the basics of perspective than this book. The thing that I love about this book is it's not overly convoluted with the information that's here. You could hand this to a 10-year-old, and they'll most likely understand it. Or they might understand it with some help. So I kind of want to just go over some things. There are some difficult things in this book towards the end, but you can realistically just skip those things for right now and then move on. But it explains the horizon line, it explains the vanishing point and the eye level, right? Simple stuff. Horizon line, vanishing point is where everything is going to. And then eye level is what you can see, or where the horizon line would go. So as you can see, the train tracks going towards the vanishing point. Very simple stuff to understand. Eye level, so basically the eye level, as your eyes move, the vanishing line, or excuse me, the horizon line will move. He explains things like underwater, stuff like that. Very cool explanations. Even shows you like the simplest thing, like draw, your lines going towards the vanishing point on the horizon line. He even goes over parallel lines. He'll explain the difference between parallel lines. He tells you to do things like put pieces of paper over a window and try to figure out where the vanishing point goes. I would not advise that, but you absolutely can do that. Then he goes into things like more going towards the vanishing point. I think he goes a little bit into 2-point perspective, and then we go into 2-point perspective. Very simple stuff, not difficult at all. You'll learn a lot from this, kind of figuring it out. There's not much there's a lot to perspective, but if you sort of get the basics, you can get away with a lot. But it's a very difficult topic that I am still learning myself. I don't know if he goes over 3-point perspective in this. He goes over more into 2-point perspective. And then he has you build, like use blocks or books to kind of build things. And then you realize, oh, I'm building a set for a building to go there. You lay these blocks in, you're going to have yourself a building. He even tricks you into doing it, which is very cool. He goes over things like placing people and understanding that people are usually shorter than doorways. Things like that, how things work with perspective, what's taller than something. And obviously he goes to the something that is closer to you is bigger than something that is far away, or it recedes as you go back. He explains crowding. I mean, anything that you need to know about basic perspective, this guy will have in here. Placing rooms, very cool. Explaining how you build a room. How to do signs. I even think he tells you how to get like the center. Yep, he teaches you how to do the center point by using the X to get the center point. And then I think he even teaches you how to, he teaches you how to get things as they're going back in this place. How you do it, you cross them and where that cross is. You add the new thing. You'll learn these in other perspective books, but this is basically the basics of it. Things like ellipses. Ellipses in perspective are very, very difficult. You might be able to draw cylinders. He even explains things like the axis point or the axis line, how it goes towards the vanishing point. How to draw basic items. This stuff is very difficult, like drawing a circle, and I just recently learned about it, and I actually forgot about how to do it. He teaches you how to do like tiling and things like that. Very simple stuff. Very important. He even teaches you stuff like shadow and light. So yeah, this is, I would say, if you're going to be an artist, this is like the equivalent of like a Bible. You should carry this thing everywhere you go, even if you are a master at what you do. This book is going to have stuff that is super important, no matter what skill level you're at. Then we go on to something like this. This is a little bit more advanced. It explains pretty much the basics of things from the beginning, and then it kind of adds to the things that you learned from the Ernest Norling book. But there's things like 2-point perspective, rooms. I don't know if there's 3-point perspective. Actually, no, there is 3-point perspective in here. So, very cool. Kind of gives you different setups, different things to look at over the head drawings, which I absolutely love. How to turn shapes into basic things. Very cool. Like how to use a cube to make, a chair. This book is very, very interesting. I don't like it as much as the Ernest Norling book. This goes over the stuff that's in the Loomis book. You know, how you move, like a figure back. You kind of measure where the feet and the head are, and then you kind of recede back, and then you get there. Cool stuff. A little more advanced. Not my favorite of the books that I own. It looks like somebody took a shit on it. Not my favorite book that I own on perspective, but very cool book. Next, we have the big boys, and these are, I'm not even going to attempt to say this guy's name, Frame Perspective. The guy who did Framed Ink wrote and I guess drew these books. He goes over the same stuff that Ernest Norling does, but then he gets into things like grids, which I think Ernest Norling goes over as well. How you can use grids to kind of catch your scene. Things like inclines, 3-point perspective, multiple vanishing points. Stuff seems really difficult, and it is. But if you actually study it and do exercises, like the reason why I like this book is because he'll give you like examples step by step, and then you go, okay, so this is my assignment. Just read what he tells me to do, and then do it. I am a little bit crazy. I'm actually going through this book, and I'm telling myself to do every example 100 times, because that way I can remember it exactly how it needs to be done. 3 vanishing points, 3-point perspective. He goes over ellipses. Very cool stuff. This is a very important book for a book that's going to be later on this list, which I think is the probably the most difficult, but might be the most helpful in the long run. But actually, I would not actually say this. I think this one and the Ernest Norling ones are super important. So, very important book. I would say I will actually give you a rundown of how I think you should go about it, how you should study it. This is only from my perception, like how I would do it. And then this one goes over things like figure, shadow, how to like put the figure in space, how to do things like foreshortening. Very difficult stuff, but super important. How to look up at a figure, how to look down at a figure, how to put a figure, how to make it. Just really, really important stuff. He even goes over things like arches and yeah. But make sure you go through this one before you go through this one, obviously, because A, it's volume 2. But even if you're like somebody who's more advanced, I would even still go through this because your basics are going to be the most important thing that you're going to want to practice over and over again. All right, so next we will go through. I'm going to go through a book that I don't particularly like. This book, I don't know how I feel about it. There's some useful information in here, but I would say that out of all the books that I'm going to show you, I don't think this is the most important, but it's okay. I mean, I think it tries to jam too much into it. It's also sometimes very confusing. It's like, oh, I understand these things that I learned from these other books, so this sort of makes sense. But any perspective book that kind of gives you something that you can do, something you could practice from, I think it just jumps from 0 to 100 very quickly. But it covers 2-point perspective. It covers 1-point, 3-point. It even covers things like using multiple vanishing points. I don't know if it goes over foreshortening. I think it does. But yeah, not my favorite. But if like this is the only book you can get, I would probably still go with framed perspective. This book and this book. This book is sort of like what is it? How to like that Scott Robertson guy. How to draw comics or how to make comics or whatever. It's very similar to that, but it's a perspective. I actually own those fucking comic book how-to books, but I don't remember the name of them. This book, I think, is better for understanding. So I think this is a book you read. I don't think this is a book you practice from. I think it's a book to kind of understand things like, kind of understand the concepts, but there's not really much practice in here. He goes over the exact same stuff: 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, measuring, making cylinders, making arches, all kinds of stuff like that. How to make simple shapes, whatever. Very cool book. I would advise this book for like reading if you want to like understand how perspective works. But there's not much to do in it, if that makes any sense. This book I picked up. This book is also very interesting. It explains pretty much the same stuff the other books explain. This book I was really excited about, and I'm not like let down by it, but it's not something that I would like make my go-to. It kind of teaches you the stuff that the other books do, but at a much slower rate. Also explains things like fisheye lens, which is very cool, which I believe the other books do too, but I just noticed it in this book. I feel like this book is more like if you want to waste paper, because it kind of explains the things in those books. Well, actually, I don't know if that's actually true. It's a very good book, but I would never draw in my books. But I don't know. I think it's a good book. I've gone through it a little bit. I think I got to the 3-point perspective point, and I was like, oh, okay, I've already learned all this. But any kind of perspective book you're going to get is going to be very important because it's going to teach you something new. There's going to be something that one teacher's going to teach you that's going to be very confusing, and then the other book is going to teach you that exact same thing in a much simpler way, and you're going to go, oh, it makes sense now. All right, and then the last one is The Big Boy. And this one, I'm sure if you know anything about perspective books, you're probably going to guess that this book is on this list. And that, of course, is How to Draw by Scott Robertson. Yeah. Just a super... Or Scott McCloud is the guy who made the How to Draw Comics book. Anyways, or whatever, How to Make Comics thing. Not the... Whatever. Anyways, Scott Robertson is the perspective guy. This shit is super advanced. And I would say that the title of this book is very It's kind of a lot, but not really. I would not advise this book to somebody who is just learning to draw. You are going to pull your fucking hair out. This was the second book I ever bought for drawing, and it made me want to quit. But I had to justify the fact that I dropped $35 on it. I think I got it for like $30, and I was like, okay, well, I spent $35 on it, so I have to just keep drawing. Um, but I'm sure somebody will use that to get the videos. There's videos in this book, which is very cool, but the videos are going to be confusing if you have no idea what the hell what you're doing. I mean, you start getting into shit like this, like wheels and shit, like very difficult stuff. I would even say I'm not even on this level yet. I'm not even close to this level, but it's a book that I definitely can see being super important once you get the other books down. Like once you understand the other books. So, I'm going to explain to you exactly how I am learning perspective, and hopefully it helps you. So, here's how I started. Started with this book. But I wasn't only using this book. I was using, I used Marshall Vandriff's perspective course. I bought that for like $14 or $12, whatever it is. I think it's $12 because I think it's $1 a lesson. Super fucking important. And the other thing that I did was weirdly enough, I bought some Udemy courses on perspective. The reason why I bought those courses was because of the fact that I want to verify that I'm understanding what's in this book. You're going to need visual aid to understand what you're doing. Like, for instance, when I first started doing perspective, learn how to fucking speak. When I first learned how to do perspective, I could not figure out for the life of me, this is going to sound really stupid, how to draw a box because I didn't realize that you're supposed to cross the lines to the opposing vanishing point. I was like putting lines, not understanding in it, and I was just trying to draw a cube. So like I wasn't doing, let me give you an example. I'm going to sound like a moron when I explain this, but so like I wasn't explaining, like I was trying to just draw these lines and I had no idea why these lines existed. And like I was trying to draw a cube. I didn't realize that like you draw an edge and then you connect the edge to get the sides and then you cross the lines to get the cube. I had no idea. Like you go from this line to that line and that line to that line to get yourself a cube. I was that stupid. And you could have given me an anatomy, or you could have given me a perspective book that literally explained that to me point by point, and I wouldn't have gotten it. It wasn't until I watched a video on somebody doing that, I went, holy shit, I can draw a cube. So it's little things like that when you're trying to learn how to draw. Super important. Because you feel like an idiot when you first start drawing. You feel like a 5-year-old, less than a 5-year-old. And I felt like a moron when I finally figured that out. And I went, oh, okay, I get it. And I never made that mistake again. And my perspective drawing has improved dramatically since then, but not by much. And I was doing like projects for school and shit, okay? And my teacher was like, what? Are you a moron? Like, I feel bad for the teacher because they weren't saying that to me. They were probably being very nice, but I literally just, I mean, one would think that I was special. So yeah. Super important to have visual aid for your book. So start with this book, very important book. Then I'd move on to this to kind of just go over everything that you went in there to kind of understand a little bit more. You could even start with this, but I feel like this would be a little too overwhelming because you'd be reading a bunch of stuff and you wouldn't actually be doing it. This book actually gives you exercises. I'm not saying every exercise in this book is great, but some of the exercises in this book are like taking the cubes and not realizing that you're making a building setting. Whenever we get there. I know I'm going over this book so much, but it's such an important book. Like this part, not realizing that you're making this, very important. So you're like, why am I doing this? Oh, I get it now. So, but make sure you cross those lines. Then I would move on to Sorry, I really should get a table. I would go to these boys next. Just to kind of verify the stuff that you already know and then go a little bit more advanced. Always use visual aid. Visual aid is super important. Just buy a Udemy course. You can probably buy one for $12. I think there's a guy named like Rich Johnson or Johnston, whatever. He has a Udemy course. I bought it for like $14-15. Super important. Also, check out Drawbox. That will just teach you how to draw a box. So go for these. Make sure you have visual aid. Do this one first. Do this one second. This one I would even be like, you know, maybe hold off for a minute. But no, just do it in that order. Then you could kind of throw this bad boy in just to kind of verify everything that you've done. And then, obviously, we go to our boy, Scott Robertson, and finish with this one. And I truly believe this. If you can go through this book and finish everything in this, I'm not saying you would draw like, Michelangelo or anything, but you will be a damn good artist. Because, I mean, learning things like this, learning how to, like, copy something that's on one side to another, that's going to be important for when you're drawing any kind of piece of architecture or any, like, vehicle or something like that. And he even goes through things like drawing planes and shit. I don't think this is a book you should go through like George Bridgman, where, like, you absolutely have to. But I feel like if you want to become like a master, like somebody who you go, oh my god, I'm drawing a Tomo level shit, I think this is probably the most important book that you can buy once you have gone through those books. So start with this bad boy and end with this one. Always, always, always use visual cues. Or what's the term? Visual whatever, examples. Scott Robertson gives you visual examples. Not on everything, by the way, but he does give you visual examples, and the ones that he gives you are super important. I remember getting stuck on a point where I had to figure out how to copy one side of a box to another. It was really difficult, and I had no idea what he was explaining, so I used the old YouTube, and some dude explained it way easier than he did. But then when I went back and watched the Scott Robertson video, I realized that I was just really stupid. But so it's a little more advanced. I would definitely say that if you find something in this book that you can't figure out and you still can understand it through the videos, just go and Google search it or YouTube search it, and I promise you'll find something. So anyways, these are the perspective books, and this is how you learn perspective. Marshall Vandriff believes you can learn it in 6 months to a year. I believe that's probably true. It's very difficult, and I am by no means a master at drawing, but I've definitely gone through this bad boy many, many times, and I carry this thing around like it's my child. I love this book. It looks like it's in great shape, which means it's like, oh man, he didn't use this book at all. I have used this book. I just take very good care of my books. Actually, this book looks like it's in worse shape than this one, but I use this book way more. I probably opened this book maybe like 10 times. This book I've literally opened up 1,000,000 times, and I have no idea why it's in such good shape, but I absolutely adore this book. So, yes. If you want to learn perspective, it's very difficult. It's not easy. It's very intimidating, but I can promise you, if you just go through this and you go through some of those framed perspective books, and through this to kind of understand what you're doing, and you have someone kind of walking you through it through video, I promise you can learn perspective. And perspective is so important. It teaches you a lot of things. It teaches you how to set up a scene. It teaches you how to set up George Bridgman believes that, figures should be in boxes. Like you start with boxes. So it'll teach you where you can put those boxes in perspective. But remember, when you're figure drawing and you're using boxes, the head, the pelvis, and the torso are all boxes, but they do not follow the same perspective. So perspective, not super important for figure drawing, but it's important for being able to draw the boxes that will get you the building blocks for figure drawing, if that makes any sense. What are some of your favorite perspective books or sources? And if you have any that have not been listed here, absolutely do share them. And I like everything that I can possibly get my hands on. I love perspective sometimes. I hate grids, but I also love them sometimes because they help me out. And yeah, thanks guys for watching. Hopefully this helps you with perspective because I know it's really difficult. Hopefully it helps you with drawing because perspective is so important.